She had been at the county clerk's office for 40 minutes before they told her. The clerk was a man named Orris, who had the specific manner of a person who enforces policy without having made it, which is the most difficult kind of person to argue with because they are not themselves the obstacle, and they know it and they know you know it, and neither of you can do anything about it. Orris had spent 35 of the 40 minutes explaining the homestead filing requirements to her with the patient persistence of a man who believed that if he explained a thing clearly enough, the woman across the counter would eventually understand and stop asking him to find another way. She had come in with her documents in order, which was to say she had the preliminary squatter's notice she had filed in April, the improvements documentation she had been keeping since March, the land survey she had paid for in July, with the money she had been saving since Ohio, and a letter from the Dunmore Agricultural Office confirming the land was uncontested and had no prior claims. She had done her research in the same way she did everything, from the beginning and without leaving things out, and she had believed that the documents she had were the documents required. The filing required a male claimant or a claimant's husband in the case of a married woman filing on her husband's behalf or a widow filing with a death certificate. She was none of these things. The 5 minutes of the 40 she had spent before Orris started explaining had been spent in the specific experience of understanding that no number of documents substituted for the one she did not have. She had known the policy in theory, which was to say she had known it existed, but she had spent 7 months building a case so comprehensive that she had believed the case would supersede the policy, and the belief had been wrong. And Orris was now explaining the policy to her with the patient persistence of a man who was doing his job correctly and knew it, and was not interested in being argued out of it. And she did not argue with him because she was not a person who argued with correct policy enforcement from the basis of believing her documents were sufficiently impressive. She was a person who looked for the next step. The next step was not apparent when Orris finished explaining. The next step had been what she was standing on the step outside the clerk's office thinking about when the man from the east spread came up the stairs. She was Iris Vane, and she was 32, and she had been living on the north quarter parcel of the Dunmore Range for 7 months as a squatter with a legal right to claim it if she filed the homestead claim within the year. And she had come to file the claim with every document Orris had told her she would need, and Orris was now telling her that the one document she did not have was the document that superseded all the others. She was not married. She had never been married. She had come west from Ohio 4 years ago because Ohio had become a place she could not stay in without eventually losing the particular quality she valued most about herself, which was the quality of being a person who made her own decisions and lived with them. And Ohio had been making that harder every year in the specific way that a place makes things harder when the place has a settled idea of what you should want and you have a settled idea of something else. Her parents had wanted her married before 25. The church had wanted her married before 25. The town had wanted her married before 25, and the town's wanting had been expressed in the accumulated small pressure of every social occasion in which the unmarried woman of 30 was a puzzle to be solved by the right introduction. And she had been introduced to 15 men over 8 years who were each in some way suitable, and she had found each of them in some way unsuitable, not because she was looking for perfection, but because she was looking for a specific thing she had not yet found, which was a person who looked at her and saw what was actually there, rather than the category she occupied. She had worked and saved and traveled west, and found the north quarter parcel on the Dunmore Range in the spring and had known immediately that it was the land she had been looking for, the specific configuration of water and range and slope that was workable by a person working alone. The north quarter had a creek that ran year-round and a south-facing slope for the structure, and enough flat range for a small cattle operation, and the timber on the east edge was harvestable without damaging the watershed, and she had moved onto it in March and been building her claim for 7 months. The building had been real. She had cut the timber herself with the 2-man saw she operated alone, which was slower than operating it with a partner, but entirely possible if you rigged the second handle to a counterweight, which she had figured out in the second week. She had built the structure in April and May, before the summer heat, 18 by 20 feet, with a sleeping loft and a root cellar, and a south-facing window that she had packed in from Dunmore in pieces over 3 separate trips. She had cleared 2 acres of range for a kitchen garden and planted it in May and harvested it in September and put up 34 jars of things that were going to see her through the winter. She had filed the preliminary squatter's notice in April with Orris's office, which had told her she had until October to file the full homestead claim, and she had come to Dunmore today to file the claim. Orris said he was sorry and there was nothing he could do. She said she understood, and she put her documents back in the envelope, and she walked out of the county clerk's office into the October morning, and she stood on the step, and she thought about the 7 months and the North Quarter parcel, and the water and the range and the slope and the single-room structure she had built with her own hands from timber, had cut and hauled. And she thought about the survey she had paid for with her Ohio savings and the 34 jars of preserved things and the 2 acres of cleared range and the root cellar that was going to keep her fed through the winter. And she thought about the fact that none of that was going to help her with Orris, because Orris did not need to be persuaded of the quality of her claim. Orris needed a husband, and persuasion was not going to produce one. She was still working through the arithmetic of the situation when he came up the step. She had seen him before. His name was Cal Ferris, and he ran the Ferris spread on the east side of the Dunmore Range, a cattle operation that had been in his family for 20 years and that he had been running alone for the last 8 since his father had moved to Denver for reasons of health. They had exchanged perhaps 15 words over 7 months, in the way of 2 people who are neighbors at a distance, and have not had occasion to be more than that. 2 sightings of the Dunmore Mercantile, 1 nod from opposite sides of the road, and the 15 words had been entirely operational, which was to say they had contained information about the road conditions or the weather, but not about the people exchanging them. This was the kind of acquaintance that was accurate, as far as it went, and went almost nowhere. He said good morning, and she said good morning. And he looked at the envelope in her hands and at her face, and she was not a person who let things show on her face that she had not decided to show. But she had been in the clerk's office for 40 minutes, and she had not been expecting to fail today. And he was a perceptive man. He said what happened. She said the homestead claim required a husband, and she did not have one, and Orris had said there was nothing he could do. He was quiet for a moment. He looked at the door of the clerk's office, and then at her, and then at the door again, and she could see him working through the same arithmetic she had been working through, which was to say, she could see a person who had looked at a situation and was looking at it completely rather than at the part they had expected to see. He said, "Wait here." She said she was not going to let him file on her behalf. He said that was not what he was going to do, and he went inside. She stood on the step. She heard through the door his voice, and then Orris's voice, and then his voice again, and then a silence, and then his voice saying something she could not hear precisely, but whose tone she could read clearly, which was the tone of a man stating a fact rather than making an argument. She heard her name said through the door, which was a different quality of hearing her name than she had experienced before, said with the specific weight of a name being attached to a situation rather than simply used to refer to a person. The door opened, and he came out. He stood on the step beside her, and he said, Orris was going to file the claim. She said, "What did you tell him?" He looked at the range in the direction of the Dunmore Road, and then at her with the direct quality she remembered from the 15 words they had exchanged, and he said he had told Orris she had a husband. She looked at him. He said she was going to contradict him in approximately 30 seconds, and he was prepared for that, and before she did he would like to say that the North Quarter parcel was hers by right, of 7 months of labor and legal occupation, and the filing requirement was a policy he did not approve of, and if she wanted to accept his help today and work out the details of what his help had implied, then he was willing to have that conversation, and if she did not want to accept it, he understood and she could contradict him now, and they could find another way. And he said this all in one breath in the manner of a man who has thought something through and is saying all of it before the opportunity closes. She looked at him for a long moment. She went back inside and filed the homestead claim. This is Dusty Vals, where stories like hers live. Women who went to file their claim and found the policy, and then found the man who could not stand the policy. Men who walked into a clerk's office and said something they had not planned to say and meant every word of it. If you want the next story the moment it lands, subscribe. Now, then back to the ranch. She did not ask him to come to the North Quarter parcel that day. She thought about it on the road home, and she decided she was not ready for that conversation in the afternoon of the same day as the clerk's office, because the conversation had too many possible shapes, and she needed to understand which shape she was willing to have before she invited it. What she did instead was go home and work the afternoon and think. She thought about it while she was patching the south wall of the structure, which was a task she had been putting off, and which was exactly the right task for thinking, which was to say, it occupied her hands without occupying her mind. She thought about what he had said, that the North Quarter parcel was hers by right of 7 months of labor and legal occupation. She thought about the specificity of that framing and about what it cost a man to say it, and what it cost a man to walk into a county clerk's office and say she had a husband. The cost was not small. The cost was that now Orris believed it, and Orris was a county official, and the homestead claim was filed under the representation that she was married, and if she was not in fact married and the filing was challenged, the claim would be invalidated, and the legal exposure of the claim being filed on a false representation was both her problem and his. And he had taken on that exposure without being asked, on a step, in the time it took her to explain what had happened. She also thought about the specific thing he had said on the step before she went back inside, which was that the North Quarter parcel was hers by right of 7 months of labor and legal occupation. She had been filing a legal claim when Orris had told her she could not, and what he had said was that the reason Orris gave was a bad reason, and the claim was valid, regardless of the policy, and he had expressed this not by arguing with Orris about the policy, but by providing the things policy required, which was the most efficient possible response to an unjust requirement. She found she approved of that efficiency. She thought about the 15 words in the 2 mercantile sightings and the nod from the horse. She thought about what 15 words told you about a person and what it did not tell you, and about the fact that what he had done on the step was not in the 15 words and could not have been predicted from them and was therefore new information, and she was a person who took new information seriously. She went to the Ferris spread the following morning. He was at the fence on the east side of the property when she came up the road, which was the location a man ended up at a specific time of morning when he had been doing the same work at the same time for a sufficient number of years. And she rode to the fence, and she got down from the horse, and she stood at the fence, and he stood at the fence, and they looked at each other across the top rail. She said she had come to work out the details. He said good. She said the claim was filed under the representation that she was married. She said if the claim was challenged, the filing would be examined and the representation would need to be real. She said she had been thinking about this since yesterday afternoon. He said he had been thinking about it since yesterday morning. She noted the morning rather than the afternoon, without making anything of it aloud. She said she had 7 months of work on the North Quarter parcel, and she was not going to let a clerk's policy take it from her. She said she was also not going to accept a legal fiction that could be challenged at any time and invalidate the claim when it was challenged. He said he had not offered a legal fiction. She looked at him. He said he had told Orris she had a husband. He said he had not said he was her husband. He said those were 2 different statements, and only one of them was technically a misrepresentation. And the one that was technically a misrepresentation was the one Orris had inferred rather than the one he had said. She thought about this for a moment in the way she thought about things that had a precise legal distinction in them, which was carefully and from the beginning. She said that was a very precise distinction. He said he tended toward precise distinctions. She said she had noticed that. She paused. She said what she had not noticed in 7 months of being a neighbor at a distance was that he was the kind of person who would walk into a county clerk's office and say what he had said. He looked at the fence rail between them and then at her. He said 7 months was a short time to know what kind of person someone was. She said she was beginning to revise her estimate. He said he had been revising his since approximately the 3rd month, which was when he had ridden past the North Quarter parcel, and seen what she had built in 3 months. And the thing she had built in 3 months was something most people took a year to build, and he had begun revising from there. She received this, which was to say she took it in and held it, and did not deflect it or minimize it because it was information she intended to use. He said he was going to say something and he was going to say it directly because indirectly was not his natural mode. She said she had gathered that, and she meant it. He said the most correct version of what he had told Orris was not a present statement, but a future intention. And the future intention was that she did have a husband, or was going to have one, if she was willing to consider the possibility. And he understood that she had come west from Ohio, specifically to be a person who made her own decisions, and he had no interest in being the kind of arrangement that prevented that. And what he was describing was a partnership that was also a legal protection. And the legal protection was the part he had walked into the clerk's office for, and the partnership was the part he was describing now at the fence. He paused. He said he had not planned to say any of this yesterday morning, and he said it today, because the not planning of it was itself information, which was that it had arrived fully formed when the situation required it, which was the way he understood things that were true. She looked at the fence and at the east range beyond it, and at the direction of the north quarter parcel, and she thought about Ohio, and about why she had left, and about what she had been looking for in the 4 years since. Tell me, when he said it was a future intention rather than a present statement, did you understand exactly what he was doing? He was saying I meant what I said before I said it. Leave your answer in the comments. I read everyone. Now, back to the ranch. She stood at the fence in the October morning, and she thought about Ohio and about the specific quality she valued in herself, and about the north quarter parcel, and the 7 months, and the single-room structure built from timber she had cut and hauled. She thought about what a partnership was and what it was not, and she thought about what it meant to be a person who made her own decisions, and whether making her own decisions and being in a partnership were two things that could both be true at the same time. She thought they could be if the partnership was with a person who understood the difference between joining a decision and replacing one. She said she needed to know something. He said she should ask. She said the north quarter parcel was going to be in her name on the claim. He said it was already in her name on the claim. She said she meant going forward. She said if what he was describing was a partnership and a legal protection, she needed to know that the land was hers, not in a handshake kind of hers, but in a documented kind of hers, because the whole reason she had spent 7 months building a claim and gone to Orris yesterday was to have the documented kind. He said the land was hers. He said he would sign anything she needed him to sign to make that unambiguous. And he said it the way he said things that were decided rather than proposed. And she heard the deciding in it. She looked at the fence and the east range beyond it, and the direction of the north quarter parcel to the northwest. She said she needed time. He said he understood, and he said how much. She said she did not know yet. She said the claim was filed and the land was documented and she was not under immediate pressure, and she was going to use the not under immediate pressure to think clearly. He said that was reasonable. She said she would come back when she had thought clearly. He said he would be at the fence. She rode back to the north quarter parcel, and she worked, and she thought. She was a person who thought well when she was working, and the working that October was the kind that needed doing in October on a property that was going to have to withstand a Wyoming winter, which was the kind of working that occupied the body and let the mind move. And her mind moved over the fence in the East Range and the man who had told Orris a thing that was not quite a misrepresentation and had said it was a future intention rather than a present statement. She thought about what she actually wanted. This was not a question she had allowed herself to ask for 4 years, because what she had wanted when she left Ohio was not to want what Ohio wanted her to want. And that negative wanting had carried her west and found her the north quarter parcel, and the north quarter parcel was the first positive thing she had wanted in 4 years. The first thing she had said yes to rather than no. And she had said yes to it and built 7 months of work into it and gone to Orris yesterday to make it legal. The answer to what she actually wanted surprised her in the way that the answers to questions you have been not asking surprised you when you finally asked them, which was that they had been obvious for longer than you thought. She wanted the north quarter parcel, and the claim, and the winter ahead, and the spring that would follow it, and she wanted all of that to include the man at the fence who said things directly and made precise distinctions, and had revised his estimate of her since the 3rd month. She wanted it to include those things not because she needed them, but because she had been thinking about the 15 words and the 2 mercantile sightings and the nod from the horse since the 3rd month also. And she had not known what she was thinking about them until the step outside the clerk's office had given her the context. And now she had the context, and what she had been thinking about was this: that there was a person on the east side of the Dunmore Range who was the specific kind of person she had been looking for in 15 introductions and had not found, and the specific kind was a person who saw what was actually there rather than the category she occupied. And she knew he was that kind of person because he had walked into Orris's office and stated a future intention as a present fact, which was the act of a person who had already decided what was true and was simply making the record accurate. She also thought about the partnership he had described and about what a partnership with a person like that would look like in practice. She thought about the North Quarter parcel being in her name in the county record and the decisions being hers, and the decisions that affected both properties being made together. And she thought that the together was the word and that together was not the same as subsumed, and she had been looking for that distinction for 32 years. And she had thought she would have to go to Ohio and back to find it, and she had found it at a fence on the east side of the Dunmore Range, and she was going to go back to that fence on the 3rd day. She worked 2 more days, and she wrote her terms on paper on the 2nd evening, because written terms were more legible than verbal ones, and because the writing of them had itself been useful, which was that it had told her what she actually thought when she had to say it precisely enough to write it down. She went back to the fence on the 3rd day. He was there. She said she had thought clearly. He said he had been waiting. She said she was going to accept what he had offered, which was the partnership and the legal protection, and she said she was going to accept it on the following terms, which she had written out because written terms were more legible than verbal ones and less subject to revision under pressure. She produced a piece of paper from her coat pocket and she read from it. The North Quarter parcel would remain in her name in the county record, and any subsequent county record for as long as she occupied it. The decisions about the North Quarter parcel would be hers, and decisions about the Ferris spread would be his, and decisions that affected both properties would be made together. She said she had one more term which she had not written down because it was harder to write down. He said she should say it. She said she was not coming to the partnership from need. She said she was coming from the same place she had come from when she left Ohio and when she moved on to the North Quarter parcel, which was the place of making a decision she had thought through and was willing to stand behind. And she wanted him to know that the decision was that she wanted to be at his fence on a permanent basis, which was a different thing from accepting a legal protection, and the legal protection was not what she was saying yes to. He looked at her across the fence rail for a long moment, with the same quality of attention he had given everything she had said over the 2 days of this conversation, which was complete and from the beginning, and without filtering for the part he wanted to hear. He said he understood what she was saying. She said she wanted to be sure. He said she had written her terms on paper, which meant she had been drafting them, which meant she had been thinking about this since she left on the 1st day, which meant the thinking had been going on in parallel, and he had not been the only one revising his estimate, and he said he understood what she was saying, and the understanding was complete. She looked at him across the fence. She said there was something she wanted to say back to him, which was that the most correct version of what he had told Orris was a future intention. And she had spent 3 days thinking about whether she shared the intention, and she had found that she did. And she wanted to say so directly because directly was the mode he had established, and she approved of it and was going to use it. He was quiet in the way she was beginning to understand, as his version of receiving something carefully. She said she had come west to be a person who made her own decisions, and she was making one now. And the decision was that she wanted to be in a partnership with a person who had walked into Orris's office and stated a future intention as a present fact. And that specific quality was the quality she had been looking for in 15 introductions and had not found and had stopped looking for, and she had found it at a fence she had not been planning to stop at, and she was not going to let the unexpectedness of the finding change what she intended to do with it. He folded the paper she had given him and put it in his coat pocket. He said the terms were accepted. She said good. He said he had a term of his own. She said she would hear it. He said his term was that the winter decisions about both properties would be made together, not because the documents required it, but because a Wyoming winter was better navigated by two people thinking about it than by one, and he had been thinking about it alone for 14 years, and he had a strong preference for the alternative. She said that was a reasonable term. He said he accepted her terms, and she accepted his. She folded the paper she had been holding, and she put it back in her coat pocket, and she thought about the North Quarter parcel and the single-room structure and the 34 jars of preserved things in the Wyoming winter coming, and she thought about what it meant to face that winter as a person who had found the specific thing she had been looking for. She looked at the fence and the east range beyond it and the direction of the North Quarter parcel to the northwest, and she thought about what she was about to say, and she said it. Iris, her name in his mouth, the first time with the full weight of it, the name of the person who had written her terms on paper and come back to the fence on the third day and said what she was actually saying yes to. She waited. I'm not going anywhere. She put the words down the way she put down a fence post, with the full weight of her and the intention that it was going to stay. She held his gaze. I came here to file a claim and they turned me away for not having a husband. And you walked in and said I did, and you said it was a future intention rather than a present statement. And I have spent 3 days thinking about the intention, and I have decided the intention is correct. She paused. I intend to be here at this fence, and at the North Quarter parcel, and in every subsequent county record, and for as long as there is an October to work through. Calf, it were the simplest arithmetic in the world. Cal Ferris. Her name for him, said the way a word sounds when it has found the person it was made for and is not going to leave. He nodded once. The matter was settled, which was a different word from closed because settled had the quality of a foundation rather than an ending, and a foundation was what both of them were in the business of building. The October was outside and the Wyoming winter was coming, and the North Quarter parcel was documented in her name, and the fence was between them for one more moment, and then it was not. And they walked back toward the Ferris, spread together in the October morning, and neither of them was going anywhere. The claim was filed, the land was hers, the terms were accepted. The winter was coming, and they were going to be there for it, and the spring was going to follow, and they were going to be there for that too, and Orris was going to find that the representation had turned out to be accurate, which was what happened when a future intention was stated correctly. And every October after this, one was going to begin at the same fence, and all the mornings that came with them were going to be theirs, and she was very much not going anywhere, and neither was he, and the North Quarter parcel was documented in her name in the county record, and she had built it with her own hands, and it was hers. And the partnership was hers, and the precise distinction was hers, and the fence was hers, and all of it was theirs, and she had come west from Ohio to make her own decisions, and this was one of the best decisions she had made, and she intended to keep making decisions that good for the rest of her life. She had come to file a claim, and they had turned her away for not having a husband, and he had walked in and said she did, and the saying had been a future intention rather than a present statement. And she had gone home and thought about the intention for 3 days and found that she shared it, and the sharing was the whole of it. And she was not going anywhere at all, and the land was in the county record in her name, and the Wyoming winter was coming, and the fence between the properties was not going to be between them anymore, and the spring after the winter was going to be something worth seeing. And she intended to see every spring that followed from this October for the rest of her particular and deliberate and self-determined life. She had written her terms on paper because she believed in legible documents, and she was a person who had built a single-room structure from timbers she had cut and hauled and preserved 34 jars of things against the winter and filed a preliminary squatter's notice and paid for a land survey with her Ohio savings. Document he had told her she would need, and the one document she had not had was the one he had provided, and the provision had been a future intention stated as a present fact, and she had spent 3 days deciding whether the intention was hers too, and the decision was yes, and she had put the yes in her coat pocket and taken it to the fence. And the fence was behind them now, and the rest of it was ahead, and all of it was theirs. and the claim was filed and the land was documented, and the winter was coming, and she had everything she had come west from Ohio to find. And she had found it at a clerk's office step in October by the specific quality of not going back inside without first hearing what a man who made precise distinctions had to say. And the quality that had kept her on the step was the same quality that had built the structure and cleared the range and preserved the 34 jars, which was that she was a person who looked at what was actually in front of her and acted on it. And what was in front of her had been entirely worth acting on.